Hello and welcome to the turbulent world with me, James M. Dorsey, as your host. US President Donald Trump has foreign governments, domestic constituencies, journalists, and pundits running in circles as they attempt to identify his Middle East policy. The confusion is evident in contradictory responses to Mr. Trump's election by some of his pro Israel supporters and early polling in the Middle East. In a twist of irony, pro Israel conservatives are campaigning against some of Mr. Trump's Middle East related appointees, despite a lineup of hardline Israel supporting cabinet level and ambassadorial nominations. At the same time, a recent opinion poll in Turkey, the first in a Muslim majority Middle Eastern country, expressed cautious optimism about Mr. Trump's second term in office. Similarly, Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan al Saud suggested that the Trump administration would not fuel the flames of conflict in the Middle East. I don't see the incoming US administration as contributory to the risk of war. On the contrary, President Trump has been quite clear. He does not favor conflict, Mr. Farhan told the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The pro Israel conservatives opposed the nomination of Elridge Colby as Undersecretary of Defense for Policy and Michael Domino as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. They noted that the two officials would brief Pete Hegseth on Middle East affairs if the Senate confirms him as Mr. Trump's Secretary of Defense and set policy. Unlike Mr. Hegseth, Messrs. Colby and Domino do not need Senate confirmation. Messrs. Colby and Domino have expressed opposition to potential US or Israeli strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. In addition, Mr. Domino has questioned whether the United States has a vital interest or faces an existential threat in the Middle East, called for a reduced U.S. military presence in the region, and criticized Israeli attacks on Iranian targets, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's goal of destroying Hamas, and U.S. strikes against Yemen's Houthi rebels. Someone who states that the U.S. has no interests in the Middle East or downplays the Iranian threat shouldn't be running Middle East policy at the Pentagon, said a representative of an influential pro Israel group. The two men's views contrast starkly with Mr. Hegseth's declaration during his confirmation hearing that he supports Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's staunch backing of Israel in the Gaza war. Ambassador to Israel to be confirmed Mike Huckabee's denial of the existence of Palestinians. And United Nations Ambassador Elise Stefanik's assertion that Israel has a biblical right to the West Bank. Critics may take heart from the second tier appointments of Messrs. Colby and Domino in the face of the top tier pro Israel lineup. It's easy to write off Mr. Trump's success in forcing a Gaza ceasefire as a one off twisting of Mr. Netanyahu's arm so that the president could display his administration's power and negotiating skills on Inauguration Day. Mr. Trump and his associates' immediate follow up was contradictory at best. Mr. Trump declared he was not confident that the ceasefire's three phases would be implemented, despite his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, planning a visit to Gaza to ensure that Israel and Hamas adhere to the agreement, and a statement by Mike Waltz, the president's national security advisor, that Mr. Trump was committed to full implementation. Yet, at the same time, Mr. Trump described Gaza, reduced to a pile of rubble by Israel's 15-month-long sledgehammer assault, in terms like his son in law Jared Kushner's assessment that Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable, and an Israeli real estate company that advertised the pre sale of Gazan lots. Describing Gaza as a massive demolition site, Mr. Trump said this week, it's got to be rebuilt in a different way. Gaza's interesting. It's a phenomenal location on the sea, the best weather. Everything's good. Some beautiful things can be done with it. It's very interesting. Similarly, Mr. Trump lifted sanctions on 33 West Bank settler vigilantes and entities in one of his first executive orders. The sanctions were imposed by his predecessor, Joe Biden. The lifting came hours after masked settler vigilantes stormed Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank, setting cars and property ablaze. Mr. Trump lifted the settler sanctions in the same breath as he granted amnesty to some 1,500 insurgents who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, to prevent the certification of Mr. Biden's election. Israel's state attorney dismissed hours earlier an investigation against 5 men suspected of killing a bound Palestinian they held captive in the aftermath of the Hamas led October 7, 2023 attack on Israel, despite credible evidence and a Tel Aviv magistrate's court's arrest warrant against 3 of the suspects. Like his remarks about Gaza, Mr. Trump's other pronouncements on the Middle East since returning to office are part talk of a real estate developer and part the reflection of a businessman who sees opportunity in everything with little regard for the political implications and risks. Mr. Trump, who broke tradition in 2017 when he visited Saudi Arabia rather than the United States' European allies on his first overseas trip as president, said he would do it again if he walked away from the kingdom with deals with U.S. companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars. I did it with Saudi Arabia last time because they agreed to buy $450 billion worth of our product. I said, I'll do it, but you have to buy American product. And they agreed to that. If Saudi Arabia wanted to buy another 450 or 500, I think I probably would go there, Mr. Trump said. Business is not the only topic on Mr. Trump's Saudi agenda. However, this time around, Saudi Arabia is likely to attach a price tag of its own. The business deals are the low hanging fruit of a 3-pronged proposition that is equally high on Mr. Trump's agenda, involving Saudi recognition of Israel, a U.S. Saudi defense treaty, and U.S. support for the kingdom's nuclear program. Saudi Arabia insists, in the wake of the Gaza war, that the proposition will only have legs if Israel agrees to a credible and irreversible path to the creation of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. The Saudi insistence flies in the face of the pro Israel hardliners in Mr. Trump's administration and the implications for the Palestinians of his real estate developer's vision of Gaza seem to ignore the immediate needs and aspirations of the Strip's devastated population. This also contrasts with the assessment of Mr. Trump's Middle East envoy, Mr. Witkoff, who believes that full implementation of the Gaza ceasefire will suffice. Saudi Israeli normalization would be a wonderful thing, but the condition precedent for that was always going to be a ceasefire, Mr. Witkoff told Israel's Channel 12. The fact that Trump has no guarantee that he will be able to square the circle increases the risks involved in a Trump visit to Saudi Arabia. Israeli officials suggested they were not about to accommodate the president. Speaking in Parliament this week, Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer stressed that Israel had not committed to the establishment of a Palestinian state in exchange for diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. In Davos, President Isaac Herzog tried to put the shoe on the Saudi foot by declaring that normalizing ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel was key to ending the Gaza war. Israelis lost trust in the peace process because they could see that terror is glorified by our neighbors. I want to hear my neighbors say how much they object, regret, condemn, and do not accept in any way the terrible tragedy of the terror attack of October 7, Mr. Herzog said, referring to Hamas's 2023 attack that killed some 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and sparked the Gaza war. Saudi Arabia's top officials have condemned Israel's war conduct, but left denunciation of the Hamas attack to figures like Mohammed al Issa, the Muslim League's Secretary General and the kingdom's point man for interfaith dialogue, and former intelligence chief and ambassador to the United States and Britain, Turki al Faisal, who is believed to reflect official thinking often. Mr. Faisal laced his condemnation of Hamas 2 weeks after the attack with criticism of Israeli policy towards the Palestinians. Taking issue with descriptions of the October 7 attack as unprovoked, Mr. Al Faisal asked 2 weeks after the assault, what more provocation is required than what Israel has done to the Palestinian people for 3/4 of a century? He added that all militarily occupied people have a right to resist occupation. In the final analysis, Mr. Trump's ability and willingness to twist Mr. Netanyahu's arm much more than he did in the walk up to the Gaza ceasefire is what will likely make the difference. While neither Benjamin Netanyahu nor his coalition partners are likely to share Trump's vision of a Palestinian state, Netanyahu's ability to resist Trump's will, unlike his dealings with Biden on this issue, will be substantially reduced, said Eitan Gilboa, an expert on U.S. Israel relations. Thank you for joining me today. If you appreciate hard hitting, fact based analysis, please consider upgrading to a paid subscription to my Substack column and podcast. Paid subscribers can access the full archive, exclusive posts, and polling. They can leave comments, join debates, and know they are supporting independent writing, reporting, and analysis that lets the chips fall where they fall. To subscribe, please go to jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choose one of the subscription options. Thank you for your support and loyalty. Take care and best wishes.